Evumuge kuriga ebefulege kuru tarefen aluwana huria befulene sarwadena. Since we have an international panelist and some expected teachers joining us today, we will be conducting the session in both English and Divehi. Fashagatumoge kuring hama technical by masalta horito chekkulumoge gotun kuda polling aluwan nagala ngeto. Me aduwange adu saafko tibefuluna livedannawa kama vaanama me checkbox ka eke jessevun eden den aduwange adu libumuga kommesar ka masalen ulenama de jassawan van ehema me tibefuluna aduwan me de instruction naki aduwange adu saafko livedannawa nama eke jassawani checkbox ka adu libumuga masalen ulenama de aduwana adi nufene okay adi ehema gina befuluna aduwange adu eba iwadannawa ege mane ki hama me yes jessevima one me jessevi ege mane ki hama me aduwange adu rangalange balli wadannawa den ekama quiz me aduwan me aduge me webinar kuriya genduma me beenun kura platform by faharu stuck vedana by faharu me screen freeze vefa horefa adu freeze vefa vesmunna wagudutan ade ehem wema me aduwan huriha befulunna ves anehen by faharu internet ke speeda internet by faharu hunna gotuge sababun mikal masalta dimawatiwe mi wara fasehen hallu kolleve goten ove hallu kurevene nama ei mi tibeflunge screenum feniwadannawane rejoin kiya button e rejoin button na fittawale vema wara fasehako alum join kollevene mi room join kollevema gina fahara me masala halluwane ekama quest by fahara hallu noeves pure ehwema hama deteren check kollevema rangaduwan ade den magina wakatake nodaka presentation takagin alun kuriye gendana alun me furatama fashani Dr. Asia Foster presentation. We will now get started with the presentations. First, with Dr. Asia Foster, who is based in the US currently. Dr. Asia is an early childhood practitioner with experience of teacher training, curriculum development, advocacy, policy, and planning. She has also held positions as an early childhood development teacher, program director, technical assistant specialist, teacher training coordinator, professor, department chair, accreditation reviewer, subject matter expert, and consultant. She has also sat on numerous local, national and international boards related to early childhood. She is currently the director of Early Childhood Learning Center and assistant professor in the College of Education at Zayed University. So that's about Dr. Asia. I am sure we will not be able to get anyone who is more relevant and better experienced than Dr. Asia to talk about today's topic. So, Dr. Asia Foster, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome today. And I want to start off by saying thank you for all of the work that you do on behalf of children and families. And today we're going to talk a little bit about integrated curriculum and how that applies to you. So I'm going to share my screen here and get started with our presentation. All right. So today we're going to be talking about curriculum integration in the foundation stages. So for how it applies to children in early childhood settings and what you as teachers and administrators should be doing to ensure that we're providing children with the best experiences that they can have. So in order to talk about curriculum integration, we need to know what it is. So if you understand what curriculum is, curriculum encompasses everything that we do from the time children step into your school buildings until the time that they leave. The activities that we provide, the experiences, the engagement, all of that is part of curriculum for young children. So when we're talking about how we integrate curriculum, we are looking first at this idea of holistic integration or holistic involvement. And what that means is that we consider all aspects of the child and their learning when we're developing lessons and activities for young children. So integrated curriculum specifically crosses subjects and learning objectives. So there's lots of overlap between content and content knowledge that we want children to have. This is the basis of what integrated curriculum is. It is taking multiple ideas and concepts and presenting them to children in a way that allows them to focus on multiple areas at the same time, which adds for a richer experience. So one of the terms that I like to use with this is it's the idea of incorporating the experiences of all of the classroom stakeholders. So when we talk about classroom stakeholders, what I mean by that is everyone who has an impact or who is being impacted by those classroom learning experiences. So first and foremost, of course, that would be young children, and then the teachers in the classroom, and then by extension of that, the families. So your integrated curriculum will also consider the experiences of all of those classroom stakeholders as well. It also provides opportunities for extended learning experiences. So what that means is that instead of just focusing on a single topic or a single subject, by integrating curriculum, you're bringing in ideas from multiple different areas. You're allowing children to have experiences that build off of a foundation and expand. So in essence, when we say we're giving children an integrated curriculum experience, what we're doing is making sure that their learning is built upon multiple different elements that are brought together. And this is one of the best ways that children learn, because this is how life happens. We don't experience things generally in isolation. So we have multiple inputs at the same time as human beings. If we're just considering our senses, you're not using your senses in isolation. Right now, you are viewing a presentation, you're listening to me talk, and so you're using multiple modalities. So the same concept applies in the classroom, where we want children to be able to use all of their faculties and all of the different inputs within that environment to help them learn. Okay, so when we talk about integrated curriculum and where the foundations of that should be, developmentally appropriate practice is developmentally appropriate practice, and the principles related to that should be the foundation. So when we talk about developmentally appropriate practice, we're talking about covering the 4 major domains of development, which you see listed here in the bottom right-hand corner. So we've got cognitive, language, physical, and social emotional. So when we look at development and how children develop, again, none of these things happen in isolation. So children are not only developing cognitively and then by language and then by physical or social emotional. These are all happening relatively at the same time. And so our teaching modalities should mimic the way children are developing naturally. And so when teachers decide what they're going to teach within that classroom setting, and what developmental domains that they want to focus on, taking those concepts and then integrating them into specific activities helps children to learn better because it's their natural way of developing. So when we talk about developmental domains, there's an overlap, as skills don't happen in isolation. And so when we're talking about how we should teach in the classroom and what we should see similar patterns to how children are already naturally developing. So this is why an integrated curriculum is one of the best ways to ensure that children receive that holistic learning experience and that we are touching on multiple different areas at the same time. Okay, so now let's start talking about some of the specifics of this, okay? Integrated activities are lessons. The way that you see this most effectively done in early learning classrooms and in foundation stage classrooms is through the use of themes. So thematic learning or project-based learning is where a single idea or topic is selected, and around that topic we build activities, and then those activities are best incorporated into learning centers. So the basis of a good classroom environment is that you already have learning centers in place, and that those learning centers are covering all of the developmental domains and skill sets that children need. So if you have that foundation set to begin with, then creating themes and projects will be easier for you to incorporate within that classroom setting. So if you've got the base of learning centers within your classroom, and learning centers typically include things like dramatic play, creative arts, manipulatives, blocks, I'm drawing a blank on the learning centers, but these are some of the typical learning centers that you would have within your classroom setting, okay? And with learning centers, it allows you to change both materials and activities regularly to fit within what you're currently trying to teach. And I apologize that this graph is not as clear, so you might not be able to see all of the different areas. But if we're taking a theme or a project, either term works well. That theme or project should be based on or can be based on several different areas. It can be based on the interest of the children. So something that stems from something you've heard the children talk about in class or get excited about. It can stem from something you as the teacher want to expose children to. It can come based on a preset curricular objective. So you might have a pre-established curriculum that has a list of themes or projects within it that you're drawing from. It can be drawn from children's real world experiences. So something happening within their environment or in their surroundings, either at school or at home, can form the basis of a theme or a project. So that's where the idea for your theme or project is initiated. And then from there is where you start the integration process. So we're gonna take the example that's listed here, where the theme is under the sea. So talking about sea creatures and the ocean, which is relevant to Maldives and your surrounding area. So it's a topic that children would have some exposure to. It would be a topic that teachers may want to introduce to children to give them more information or to engage them within their environment. So this is a topic that may come up. How this becomes integrated is looking at, here is my theme or here is my project, and from this, these are the concepts that I want children to learn. And along with those concepts, at the same time as a teacher, what you want to be doing is thinking about what are the main developmental objectives or learning outcomes that I'm looking for as part of this process. And so you're going to be basing your integration activities in tandem with those things. So, for example, under language arts, you're going to be thinking about what learning objectives do I want children to be focused on around language, and how can I incorporate activities that are related to this under the sea theme, but also meet general learning and development objectives. So language arts is a good one to always start with, and a recommendation that I always have for teachers is to select stories that are focused on your topic that will then allow you to introduce your theme to children. So starting with language and engaging them in a topic firsthand from that perspective through a book is a great way to start an integrated theme and introduction to further activities. So language arts, you may be providing a book that focuses on an undersea theme or a concept. It may be related directly to the under the sea, or it may use characters or instances that are situationally appropriate. So, for example, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book Rainbow Fish. So the Rainbow Fish setting is under the sea. However, it's not a discussion of sea creatures or things like that. It's a book about social emotional learning and sharing and making friends. But it relates to your theme because what children are seeing within that storybook are characters under the sea. Okay, so keep in mind that when you're doing these thematic integrated lessons, you're not necessarily focused on teaching a concept that's specifically about your theme, but it may be related or adjacent to that theme. So one of your learning objectives may be to help children build their social emotional skills for sharing and integrating. So using that book that's related to this theme is one way that you can do that. And then you can move into more of the specific concepts that are related to your theme directly. So for cognition, you may be introducing children to actual aspects of the ocean and what they would find underwater and the sea creatures that live there. If you're talking about creative arts, you would allow children to express the things that they've learned, maybe in that cognitive activity, in a creative way. So we'll talk a little bit about assessment in a minute, but a creative art activity that allows children to explore further textures or concepts or aspects of the ocean through art. Music and movement is another one where you're focusing on motor skills, but you're also incorporating aspects of under the sea. So maybe there's a song that's related to this that you've included a movement activity with. So those are ways that you're going to pull different activities and different aspects to relate to your central theme. One thing to also remember that's included in here that you might not be able to see well is field trips. Where can you take children to expand on the theme and provide real world experiences for those integrated concepts that you want to teach? So you may be physically taking children to a place to experience things, or you may be bringing those experiences into your classroom in the form of experts who can then provide an extension for those learning experiences. So for example, if you're talking about under the sea, you may bring in a marine biologist who talks with children about native creatures and animals that are found in the oceans around Maldives. That's then related to your topic. I would encourage you to reserve those types of things for later on in your thematic experiences to allow children to have some good foundational knowledge with other activities and aspects of the theme first. So starting with an introduction that's language related is always a good one. And then somehow in the middle or the wrap up, bringing in experts or taking children out to experiences would be helpful as well. I'm going to move along because I know I'm running out of time here, but I do want to encourage you to think about integration as the incorporation of other aspects as well. So it's not just about activities. So with an integrated curriculum, you want to think about social integration. So how are you incorporating aspects of children's social emotional learning, ways for them to interact and engage with one another and engage with outside individuals as part of their learning process. Knowledge integration means how do you express these themes, but start with the foundation of what children already know. So bringing in their foundational knowledge as the basis for developing any of these themes is really important. Integration of experiences is similar to what I was talking about around field trips and bringing in professionals. And then curriculum integration is the learning centers and the learning activities that you're going to build your theme around your theme. Very quickly, I want to remind you that assessment is really important in the process of integrated curriculum. So all of your integrated curriculum models should also have integrated assessments. And what that means is that you want a big picture of your objective. What do you want children to learn from this thematic experience? But you also want to have those secondary objectives that are built into each individual activity. So what's the objective of this lesson and how does it link to the larger objective of the theme? So those are questions that you should be asking yourself continually. And once you have that in your mind, as you are implementing lessons and activities in the classroom, you should be assessing in real time. So taking those questions and asking yourself, how do you know that your objective has been met? How do you know that children have learned the things that you want them to learn? And if they haven't, what are some of the challenges to their learning that are occurring that you need to address? All right, so planning is the most important part of this. And in order to have a good integrated plan.
Dr. Asia?
Yes?
I would request you to wind up your presentation in like 1 or 2 minutes, if that's possible.
Sure. And then we can come back to this in the question and answer part. So I will go through this really quickly. Yeah. Okay. So as we've talked about before, you need to base all of this on developmentally appropriate practices and what is developmentally appropriate for young children. Have those clear learning objectives in place. Ensure that you are observing within the lesson so that you understand what children are able to do and what they're not able to do, and how you can expand on those activities based on the interests that you see children have. I think one of the most important things is you need to be organized and make sure you put enough time into the planning of lessons so that you can see on a larger scope what you want to engage in with children. And then during those lessons, doing those regular observations and taking notes, and referring back to that for improving your own practice. Okay, so we can continue this discussion at the end after the next presentation, but really think about at least one question or scenario that you'd like to discuss based on things that are happening within your own classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Asia Foster. That was very informative and also very, very inspiring. I'm sure our teachers will have a lot to ask from you regarding this topic. So teachers, please keep noting your questions, and also please post your questions in the chat box so that we can address the questions in the Q&A time after the two presentations. Once again, thank you, Dr. Foster, for the very inspirational presentation. Now, with that, I would like to invite our second speaker, Ms. Shyama Abubakur, to give her presentation. Before that, since our audience is mostly Maldivian, I think Shyama can continue her presentation in Divehi if she wishes to, because I know that she has prepared her presentation in English, which means those teachers, especially expected teachers joining us today, can follow her presentation while the others can listen more comfortably in our local language. But Shyama, it is your choice. Please continue. But before that, I also will have to give an introduction to Shyama. Shyama yaki mi dairaga mi denwe early childhood education dairaga maseke kuravata tiri havure ginaduas vefawa befre miwaguto Shyama maseke kuravani National Institute of Education ge School of Early Childhood Development Department ke MA Sveriya ge gotuga Shyama ge maganu zimma takaki rajya ge school takuka foundation stage ka benum kura munda curriculum ತಯಾರು ಕುರುಮ ಐ ಕರಿಕ್ಯುಲಮ್ ತಂಫೀಸ್ ಕುರುಮ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ ತಕ ಬೇಣುವ ಫಣ್ಣಿ ಎಹಿ ತೆರಿಕಂ ಫೋರ್ ಕೊದ್ದೀನು ಶಿಯಾಮ ಮಿದಾಯಿರಾಗ ಟೀಚರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತುಗ ಅದಿ ಟೀಚರ್ ಎಡ್ಯುಕೇಟರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತುಗ ಅವೆಸ್ ವರಗಿನ ಮುದ್ದತೆಗ ಹಿದುಮೆ ಕುರವಾಫೆವೆ ಶಿಯಾಮ ಮತೀತಾಲಿಂ ಹಾಸಿಲ್ ಕುರವಾಫಾವಣಿ ವೆಸ್ ಹಮ ಅರ್ಲಿ ಚೈಲ್ಡ್ಹುಡ್ ಎಡ್ಯುಕೇಷನ್ ದಾಯಿರಾಯ್ ಎಗೊತ್ತುಂ ಮಲೇಷಿಯಾಗೆ ಯುನಿಟಾ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಮಾಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಡಿಗ್ರಿ ಹಾಸಿಲ್ ಕುರವಾಫಾವಾಯಿರು ಶಿಯಾಮ ಬ್ಯಾಚಲರ್ಸ್ ಡಿಗ್ರಿ ಹಾಸಿಲ್ ಕುರವಾಫಾವಣಿ ವಿಲಾ ಕಾಲೇಜು ಶಿಯಾಮ ಯಕಿ ಮಿದಾಯಿರಾಯ ವರ ಪೆಷನೇಟ್ ಕೊ ಹಿದುಮೆ ಕುರವ ಮುಂಗೆಂದವಾ ಬೇಫ್ಡೆ ಶಿಯಾಮ ಗಬುಲ್ ಕುರವ ಗೊತ್ತುಗ ವರ ಲೋಯ್ಬಾ ಹಿತುಗೆ ಅಡಿಂ ಲೋಯ್ಬಾ ಐಕೋ ಕುರಂ ಬೇನು ನುವಾ ಕಮವಾಣಮ ಮಿ ದಾಯಿರಾಯಕಿ ಎಹಾ ಫಸೆಹ ಮಸಿಕೆ ಕುರವೇನೆ ದಾಯಿರಾಯನು ಮಿ ಅಡುವನ್ ಮಾ ಗಿನವಾಕತಿಗೆ ನುದಕ್ಕ ಶಿಯಾಮಾಯ ಫ್ಲೋ ಓಪನ್ ಕೊಲಾನ ಶಿಯಾಮ ಶಿಯಾಮ ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಕತ್ತಿ ಹೊನ್ನೆ ಮೇವಗುತ್ತು
ಶುಕ್ರಿಯಾ ಶೂದಾ ದೆನ್ ತಿ ಅಳ್ಗೊಂಡ ತಿ ದೇವಿ ಇಂಟ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ವರ ಬಡ ಶುಕ್ರಿಯಾ ದೆನ್ ಹುರಿಯಾ ಬ್ಯಾವರಿನ ಅಳನ ಮರಹಬಾಕಿಯ ಮಿಯದು ದೆನ್ ಅಳ್ಗೊಂಡ ಹಮ ಆಶಯಾಗೆ ಮಿ ಸೆಷನ್ ನ ಗುಳಿಗೆನ್ ಹಮ ಅಳ್ಗೊಂಡ ಮೆಂಗೆ ಮಿಹಾರ್ಗೆ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ಕದಾಕಂತತ್ತ ಬಡ ಬಲಾಲಾನಿ ಇಂಟಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಕುರುಮಟ್ಟ ಕಾಳ್ಮೆನ್ ಕುರಾಕಂತತ್ತ ಹೇ ಮಳನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಕೊಲ್ಲಾನ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ उम्मीद करा हो रहा है बेफनेस पेन्ना ने कम फेने लगा तो
ए बा फिनिश या
आधा मैं तो का टॉपिक में करिकुलम इंटीग्रेशन इन फाउंडेशन स्टेज दें अलगुन हम मी बोटा गेंदानी दिवे ही अन्ने दें बाय फारा मी टर्म्स ता बेनु कुरेवे नेगे तो इंग्लिश होंगे वाहग देखु मुगवे समा मी अलुमें कितने बार का देबस एनु पुराशे कीमना कम कोई समा अलुमें ने समा गेंदेवे नहीं है तंग फंसे है एम बालाना हम दिवे ही ಬಾಹುಕಂ ಗೆಂದೆವೇತೋ ನಮವಿಸ್ ಬೈ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ತ ಕಿವರ ಉಂದಗು ಬೇನು ಕೊರಂಗ ಎವಿ ಮೈ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ತ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಬೇನು ಕೊಫ ಅಳುಮನ್ ಗೆಂದಾನ ತೆ ಮಿಗೊತ್ತು ಗಮನೆ ಅನೆ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಗ ಕರಿಕ್ಯುಲಮ್ ಇಂಟಿಗ್ರೇಷನ್ ನಕಿ ಕೋಚ್ ಎತ್ತು ಅಳುಮೆ ಮಿ ಬಲನ್ ದೆಂ ಆಶಯ ಅವರ ರಂಗಳಂ ಆಶಯಗ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಗ ವಿದಾಳು ದೆವ್ಯಾಫಿ ಇಂಟಿಗ್ರೇಷನ್ ನಕಿ ಕೋಚ್ ಎಕ್ಕ ಕಿ ವೆಗೆನ್ ಕಂ ಇಂಟಿಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಕುರನ್ ಜೇನಿ ದೆಂ ಅಳುನ ಹಮ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಗ ಮೆ ಪ್ರಥಮ ಬಲಾಲಾನಿ ಏಗೆ ಅನೆ ಮುಹಿಮ್ ಕಮಗೆ ಮಚ್ಚ then balala iruga mem pratham ekamaki ane mi integrate kurmatta ka alume mi focus kurani theme takaka pahalage theme maka focus koge mi gendani boda ei kudinnan e manahu rechiga gotuka daskodde tirumatta ka mi gendani ehme tafatu mi ane asha vidalwe hen e big idea egge tere mi negigen e idea baataka ka behigen ekati anika chaguligen dagotuka midani ehme mamiga asuga එමෙ මුහිම්මු කමකේ කුදින්න තෆාතු කන්තත්තක ගුලිගෙන් මානහුරි ගොතෙග දස්කුරම් වර ෆසේ හේ මි තීම් තකක බහලා ගන්නුනි වකේ තීමෙන් එගිගෙන් ඒක තෙරෙන් දාකම වානම දෙ මි අසු ඉන්ටග්‍රේට් කුරුමන් එමෙ ෆසේ හේ එක්වේ ඉංගතෝ දැන් අනෙකම කී අසු කුදින්න බොඩන් අලුමන ඔපචුනිටිස් ද දෙවෙන මියා ෆුර්සත් දෙවෙන කි කංකං දිරාසා කො බලා හොදා බලා අනේ දිරාසා කුරුමුගේ බෑග දැන් මේ කුදින්න අසු අමිල්ලය මේ කොන්ස්ට්‍රක්ට් හොග්ගෙන් කුදින්න මේ දස්කුරම් ෆසේවනි හැම මිකාලා අනේ බයකුන් අසුග තීමකුන් නගාගෙන මිගොතන් ඒ බයන් ඉන් ඩෙප්ත් කොන්නුනි ඒක අනේ ෆුනක් දාන් කුදින්න අසු වර බොඩ ෆුර්සත් ලිබේ ඒ ඉම්මා දාග අනේ මා දා ගුලිගේ මියන්න ආශා විදාලු ඒ කොන්සෙප්ට් අනිස් කොන්සෙප්ට් ගුලවාග මිගෙන්දා එහෙම වාහකකි එම්මා වකි මාද්දාතකගේ ගොතකුණෝනේ අලම හුරිහා මාද්දාතකෙන් එක්කොල්ලාගෙන් එකි මාද්දාතකුගේ කොන්සෙප්ට්ස් ත ගුලිගෙන්නේ මිදනි එහෙන් දස්කුරෙම එකි දායරා තකුන් කුදින්නම් මිද්ලිබේ මවුලුමාත আদি හොදා හොදුන් තකුගේ අලීගේ කුදින්නම් ඒ මවුලුමාතන් එමෙ ෆුරිහමය ගෙනස්තේ දැන් අනෙකම කි අලුමෙන් අසුග මිහෙන් ගෙන්දියාම කුදින්ගේ මේ කුරවේ එක්ස්පීරියන්ස් උන්නා আদি කුදින්ගේ හුන්නා මේ තෆාතු තංගස් දෙනගන්නම් වර ෆසේ හැවේ අල්මිටි ටීචරුන්ගේ හයිසියතුන් වෙස් මිගොතන් අලුමෙන ගෙන්දවේ කමවඤ්ඤ දැන් ඒක ඉතුරුන් හැම මේ අලුමෙන මේ වනේ බස් තරගයු මේ තෆාතු මේ සබ්ජෙක්ට් ඒරියාස් තකුග මිහුන්න concepts ත කියා දේරු තෆාතු ඒ තීමක ගුලිගෙන් අන්න තෆාතු බස්තක කුදින්නගේ බදස් එහෙම බස්තරක් ගීවුම බස් වරබ්බඩ හිතරිකම කුදින්න අස්සුගේ බතේවේ දැන් ඒක ඉතුරුන් අනේ මේ කුදින්නන් එකලා ಹುಟ್ಟುಮೆನ್ ನಾಸ್ ಕುರಿಯ ಗೆಂದೇವೆ ಗೊತ್ತಕಂಗೆ ಬದ್ದೆ ಎಚ್ಚ ದಿಗು ದೆಮಿಗೆ ಕುರಿಯ ಗೆಂದೇವೆ ಗೊತ್ತೇಗೆ ಮಾಲೂಮಾತ್ ಹಮ ಕುದಿನ್ ದಾಂಬೇನು ವಾಯ್ಮೆ ಫುಮ್ಮಿನಕ ಗೆಂದೇವೆ ಗೊತ್ತಂಗ ಅಳುಮೆನ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಕೊಂಗೆ ಬ ಗೆಂದೇವೆ ಮಿ ಗೊತ್ತಂಗ ಅಳುಮೆ ಗೆಂದೇವೆ ಕಮ ವಾಣ್ಯ ದ ಮಿ ಗೊತ್ತಂಗ ಅಳುವಣ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಫರತ ಮಮ್ಮಿ ಬಾಲಾನಿ ಏಕಲ ಕುದಿನ್ನ ಕಿಯವಾ ದಿನುಮ ಅಗಣ್ಣ ದಿನುಮ್ಗ ಅಳುಮೆ me inge kanta kuriya dagen almunge local ne context ganuni almunge rajya ka kanta dagen ekotun almun hama emme fretam balala ni kuriyan almun balala iruga almunge kuriga curriculum menne den hama me eki school taw almun me kiyawa deni hama eruga wes theme nuni topic en eba naga ehem nama wes e topic mi naga ni wara general eche misalakan almun minegi ane transport ga ure eki modes tadetto මෙහරේකි වත්තරුග කඬුග දුවායචි එගම්ග දුවායචි මතින් දුවායචි එහෙමි හුරිහායචන් අලුමෙන් එෆාරා මිගෙන්දනි එන් හෆ්තායි පහලාගෙන් ගෙන්දායරුක මිහම වරබ්බඩන් හම මි ටච් කොල්ලව නේචිග නන්තන් ඉගෙන ඒ දුවාය නේ කොන්තණෙග කමි මිම්බර පුදින්න අලුමෙන් මාලුමාත් මි දෙවෙනි දැන් අමි එයා ගුළුවාක කොමසරකන් අලුමෙන් එබ නගා එහෙ මාද්දාතවග කොන්සෙප්ට් එකම එවස්තනි වකි මාද්දාතකෙග ගොතුග ටොපික් එකේ ගොතුග එහෙම ඒ මා බොඩ කොන් කුජා දිරාසා කොන් එචි හෝදුම්ග ෆුර්සත් කුදින කන්නුලිබේ දැන් වරපඩන් අලුමෙන් කුරීගමි ගෙන්දනි හැම ටීචර් සෙන්ටර් ටීචර් හුරි හැච්ච කියා දෙනි කුදින්න හැම දෙනි ඇක්ටිවිටි යෙන් ඒ ටීචර් ගිනෆාර බේනු ක්‍රියේටිව් වෙච්ච දින සම ටීචර් ගිනෆාර බේනු වා ගොතක කුදින්න හදන් දෙනි කොම්මස එකච්ච දෙනි චොයිස් කුදින්න කන් අසුනු දෙවේ මෙහර ටීචර් බේනු මනි අමි කාරේ තයාර පුරා ඒ එනගේ ක්‍රියේටිවිටි ගේ ක්‍රියේටිව් ඒරියා ගේ එන බේනු බෙෆබින් එක එහෙම ජයන දේනි ක්‍රියේටිවිටි කාරේ එකම් කාරු දීපවස් එන මිසලක කොලාජෙන් හදන් දින කුදින්න තෆාතු වත්තරුගේ අනේ සාමාන්‍ය නුදේ හැම එකච්ච මුන්නාන් එහෙම මී අස වරබඩ කුරිය එකම් මිහාර අලුමෙන් එබ මි කරිකියුලම් මයිකි ගමි බෑතන් එබ වරබඩ බදල් වෙගෙ මියන්නනි dem hama kuri alwan denne vi hama mi subject wise kom mi haru topics tak ek mi gendani hama waki topics tak gota pahala ge mi gendeveni den boden alumena mi focus kureveni hama mi reading writing na mi akasha mi asha vidal wen kudinga show mi domains tak ka huriha domains tak ka visnaga ne nun asolmen kuri ge mi gendie nama salumen dehas mi fanaravana haruga almen mi a curriculum තයාර කුර ඉරුගමි ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් ස්ටේජ් මි වැටා එකීගමි තයාර කුරෙවනි ඒගොතන් කරිකුලම් එකීගමි තවලිමි නිසාමු මිහාර ෆස් මි ස්ටේජ් එක නුනි ෆස් බයක බෙහිගෙ මිදියයි ඒගෙතරේ ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් උම් ෆෙටිගෙන් ගොස් කී ස්ටේජ් ෆහක හැම මිදියයි ඒ මිදියරුගමි රස්මි තවලිම් ගතරේ මිහාර ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් ස්ටේජස් වදගෙන් කරිකුලම් මෙ රේවිගෙ මිතානි එහෙම මී අසුග අල්මන ලිබුණු වරබොඩු මේ හිවරෙන් අදි වර මි දායිරා කුරියරු අල්මන ලිබුණු වරබොඩු ෆුරසතේ එහෙම මිහාරු මි ඔන්නනි එක් කරිකියුලම් කන් අල්මෙන් මි මසෙක්ක කුරනි ඒ මසෙක්ක කුරායරුග ඒගේ මේ අල්මෙන් හාසිල් කුරම් මි බේනුම් වා කන්තත්ත මි හුරිහා ස්කූල කුමි හාස් ගෝරෙන් අමස් කුරී අල්මෙන් මි කරිකුලම් නෙතීම එකි තන්තනුගේ කි ගොතන් අල්මෙන් මි දෙනි ඒ මිහාරකම් කො මිස්ටා බෙන් අල්මෙන්ගේ බෑනේ කොන් දිමාල කොන් දාම්බි අල්මෙන්ගේ පෙන්ගේ ඒ කරිකුලම් මේ පාලාලා දැන් හැම ඒගොතුන් අලුමෙන් මිහාර කරිකියුලම් ගමි ඔන්නනි කියවා දිනුන් අලුමෙන් මේ තරුතීබු කොරාවාලාගෙන් ගෙන්දානේ ගොතෙවස් කණේලිෆා ඒගොතන් අලුමෙන් හැම සබ්ජෙක්ට් එකේ වෙසෙබ හුරේ ඒ නමවස් ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් ස්ටේජ් ගලුමෙන් සබ්ජෙක්ට් එක සිලබස් හෙදිෆ හුරි කම්ගා වියස් අලුමෙන් මි ගෙන්දනි ඒ යානේ සබ්ජෙක්ට් කොට කන්නු අලුමෙන් හැම ආශා විදාල් වෙල් ලර්නින් සෙන්ටර්ස් තකෙන් හදාගෙන මි ගෙන්දනි ඒගොත හැම මි ආශා බෙෆ්‍රම් ගෙංගුලවා කහල හැම සෙන්ටර්ස් අලුමෙන් මිකොලුගස් මි ගෙන්දනි ඒගොතන් හැම මි කුළුමුගේ බයෙන් කුලෙන් වකින් හාස කොෆින සෙන්ටර් ඉඳේ දෙන් කනේ ඇත්තරිම සෙක්කතා මි ක්‍රියේටිවිටි කන්තත කුරුම කුදිනන් ඉඳේ දෙ මැනිපියුලේටිව් මැටීරියල්ස් නුනි මැතමැටිකල් ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් බෙසල්මෙන් රේෆ ඉඳේ දෙන් හැම ඒගොත ලැන්ග්වේජ් සෙන්ටර් එවස් හුරේ ඒගොත සයන්ස් සෙන්ටර්ස් හුරේ ඒක මානේ කි මි හුරියා සෙන්ටර්ස් තකෙන් අලුමෙන්ගේ හුරිකම් ගාවියස් කොම්මදු කලුමෙන් හුරිහා සෙන්ටර්ස් එ බේනමෙන් කුරේමි අලුමෙන් තීමෙන් නගා තීමෙග දසුන් එ නගා එ රාවා ෆින ඇක්ටිවිටි එක ගුලිගන්නේ අලුමෙන්ගේ පොඩක් මියන්නනේ දැන් මිහාරු මි අනේ මි ප්‍රෙසන්ටේෂන් ගමි ෆෙන්න ගොත කී ලර්නින් ඒරියාස් එ මින මි කී ලර්නින් ඒරියාස් ගේ දසුන් මි අන්නනි අස්ලුග මෑගඬු madda tamyanani subject tamyanani de mi hama mi grade foundation peshigen go sama mi key stage 5 wa hame mi hiri behi funna go den ehen namaves foundation stage ga tankole madda ta madubane tankole mi basic bataka boda subject taka boda base ko minani foundation stage ga then mi gota rawala falume mi organize kuravununiya mi kiyawa dinun mi rawala ifawa gota balafa den alumen ge mi curriculum ma ekiga mi eruga alumen curriculum tayar kuriruga ega barivi stakeholders na huriha emme gulige maseka ko alumen emme best practice ekama alumen mi benu ane research takunna adi mi hunge experience unna bala alumen hama emme rangole icheka alumen mi fenuni subject integration nege now best practice egota mi alumen mi negi alumen ge mi new curriculum school taga implement kuram mundiya irugaya adi mi alumen mi yang amal kuram feshuma eki alumen mi gengulani mi visnume curriculum integration ne gendani school taga theme based teaching ne dani mi gotan alumen nai mi decide kuri hama mi huriha approach taka bala mi approach mi me rangol approach kama bala den egotun alumen waragina training take mi curriculum feshuma taka alumen baby e training tawga gaganaka 1000 nen ha teachers alumen muli rajyege ki kankol eki hisab gahan alumen hama train kuri hama huriha teachers es curriculum train kurevunu den kogge mi training ge tere alumen boda mi focus kurevunu bataka ki curriculum man orient kuriyai ei mi deas fanarwarna aharu alam mi rajyega mi foundation stage ga curriculum me taaraf kurevigen deve mi alumen ge teachers waran miya ehme alumen miya baraboda teachers orient kurevunu kihinekkan curriculum men onnani kon kantataka kamiga himeneni mi batawge macha baraboda mi orientation devgen em ahulu veri kuramu den ege terega hama alumen mi gendiyai hama classroom setup ergo esalumen komasaraka setup gengulen ekam eruga wagotaki miharu ane magano academic me liun kiumuga me liam mide masakka nuni fotuga mide harakata nimuni ma kudinna deveni dramatic area aves nuni ehen area kaves kudinna kule eka miharu alumenge mi ane curriculum ma ekiga mi revuni ei small group activities terege mi unnani huriya centers ta mi centers ta en irega huriya kudin masakke kurani eki areas tawga mi pandele furi masekka taka kudin e fahara masekka kurani group taka behigen dani den roll out kurani e group ane group e duhuge kaneli fawa e wagutu nimende ei alume miharu refe mi kotan alume classroom reoma teachers gengole ane strategies taka mi kudin mihen henuma taka gengole strategy taka ichi alume training ge terega waraboda gendem den hama yaiki assessment approaches mi gendem integration hama mi asha vidalu hen domain base kon alumemes mi gendani ehme domain base assessment ke alumenge kudinge dani alume di subject tawga mi outcomes taken hutte kamako outcome taken hutte kamako alumen assuga mi ti dani mi ane ego seshe okay den ane den hame gotan alumenga mi assessment asu boda mi annani hama mige tereng alumen dasko deni ane mi activities ta mi centers terega mi dairuge e da wagutu alumen SSS kuramum medani den ehme komme teacher request komme lesson ka guligem mes innane mi kandala fa konkala assessment etto ene du gendani e filawle nuni e objective nuni mi outcome en hasil kurumataka den hama ya eki galumenga mi gendiya hama lesson plan inne mi den asu emme boda teachers emme challenge in echaga teachers una vi asuga plan kurumuga if they were time nagaga mi planning ge back kuriya mi gendan jeni den mi hama mikanta kurumataga alumen eruga dehas hanaravana harun gaganaka detin ahare vanden alumen amilden hama mi NI ge faratun alumen unit plans taken hadagen alumen share koggen huriha teachers unna mi beenu kuran alumen furusatu dini ekam mihar alumen hama mi unit plans ta naga mihar amille plans ke datu teachers masakke kuragota mihar alumen rawaf wani ඒරුක දැන් මේ ආවෙෆා අදි වරම් මද ටීචර්ස් තිබෙෆා ටීචර්ස් මිකමන් ආවීම අලුමෙන් ඒරුක ඒ කුදි ටීචර්ස් උන සපෝට් දිනුමට්ටක අලුමෙන් රේවි රාවාගේ කුරිය ගෙන්දිය කම එක මිහාරස් මිය ටීචර්ස් පරිතවි මෙහෙම මිබේ අලුමෙන් කුරිය මිගෙන්දනි මිහාර ටීචර්ස් අම්මච්ච දු කොල්ලාගේ දැන් ඒගොතුන් අලුමෙන්ගේ හැම process මේ දා ඉරුක මේ planning process ගේ මේ ප්‍රථමයන් අලුමෙන් මේ කුරංජේ කම කියාෂා විදාල්වෙන් අලුමෙන් තීමෙන් මිනගංජේ තීම නගායර වස්ස අලුමෙන් වරබොඩන් එබ විස්නංජේ තීමෙන් මිනගෙනි කුදින්ග ශෞගවරිකන් හුන්න දායරය කොන්තෝ කුදින් මීග මේ හෝදා බලා තජරිබා කුරුම ෆුර්සත් දෙවේ කාලා තීමෙත්තෝ ඒ කුජ්ජගේ මාහෝලා ගොළුන් හුරිගේ මාහෝලකුන් කුදින්න ලිබේ එචි බේනුපොගන් කුදින්න දිරාසා කුරවේ කාලා තීමෙත්තෝ මී අසු වර මුහිම කමෙන් අලුමෙන් තීමෙන් නගායර ඉංගතෝ දැන් හැම මේ සාම්පල් අනේ එච්ච මින් දලුවන් දක්කාලා දැන් මියම් මෙපෙන් මි හදනි හැම ideas jot down kollani me furatamanu team naga jot down kolla faden e jot down kurevuna ideas tangal me categorize kurani sub teams takaka me hatti be funa me feni wada gannawani me sub teams ta ingeta sub teams takaga kotaga me fenani alume me har misalakan hissu alume topic aka team kannaga e dashun me alume me gendani sub teams takanaga then me sub teams tameri ki subject areas takaka kanu bakwe alume egan me jot down kuri maulumat almens miri categorize kollafa nuniya bahalafa miri kudi teams sakage teriya then mi ti hada nimune ma den almen syllabus nagagen almen mi balalani mi syllabus ge subject areas ta huka miri kobat kom baeto mi ge tereng yang mi link wani ade link wa bag tereng kobato miyan emme gulun huri teams takaki දැන් ඒගොතන් අලුමෙන් හැම මිහිරි මිහාර මිසාලක නගා ෆමිරි ෆෙනනි මින්දි ඉංග්‍රීසි ගේ මේ සයන්ස් ගේ අලුමෙන් මිසාල දක්කලා හැම මිසාල එංගෙතෝ මිගතෙන අලුමෙන් මේ නෙගි අනේ අවුට්කම් මේ නගා ෆමි අවුට්කම් අලුමෙන් හදාගොත කි අවුට්කම් ගේ හුරි කන්ටෙන්ට් ස්කිල්ස් තක වකි කොල්ලන්නේ ඒ රංග අසලුමෙන් නමි developmentally appropriate එච්ච ගෙන්දන් අදි කුදින්ග ගනේ මි continuous කොන් integrate කොග්ගෙන් ගෙන්දන් එමෙ ෆසේහයි මිගොතක් කම වීම මිගොතන් අලුමෙන් huriha mi negunu huriha subject areas ga in outcomes takon almen content and skills ta migota waki kolla fa den almen mi kura kamaki almen mi manhaj ga ba ane 8 key competencies that then mi key competencies ta mi as almen magan maksad ki kujja nimigen dairu ga mi gabiliyat ta kujja ga harulevu adi mi values ta kujja ga harulevu ehme almen mi key competencies tan emme alumen select kuri echaka emme gulun huri key competencies taka adi values tak tere embes egen alumen emme e thema ka gulun huri values ge mi hunna bataka mi gane adi hamma mi key competencies ga mi hunna indicators tan akun alumen nagani mi har mi ga kommen ag gabiliyat alumen furi ham kura kanu jene ekam e negi theme ge dashun e outcomes tan hasil ma bala alumen negene migen egen emme gulun huri kon outcomes take to mi outcomes takum guys whatever indicators unan komme ani gabiliyet ge dasho mi gabiliyet tawge terembe alumen etanun ham select kurani emme gulun huri indicator mi dehar du tere kudin ham kuran jehene mi alumen mi kandala furi indicators tan ehmi alumen egota mi practice ginan kuri warakan asu kudin gaga mi harle bumga ba boda dani hemi mami asu filawluga tere bodan himanan gendi machaka alume rawa faingwe den hame egota mihar alumen echi rawala nimmala den alumen mi domains takam mi pahalani ekala mi alumen negi object ne outcomes tere negi skills a content a ekala alumenge mi hadafi mind map a guluwage ega eheri batak dafa dega migutan alumen domains takam mi bahalani den alumen miyan ane daily plan aka gos activities tam mi hadani e hadaeru ge hemi alumen subject ekata nune hedeni ki alumen emme haraka hadafa e hamaya harakatun ekkala learning centers tago kurane masakketakan alumen rawalani එහෙම මී අසුග එම්මෙ බොඩ එම්මෙ රංගලන් ඉන්ටග්‍රේට් කොග්ගන් ගෙන්ද වෙනග එහෙම මිගොත මිහාර සල්මෙන්ගේ ප්‍රැක්ටිස් මි කුරෙවෙනි එහෙ නම්වස් අදිවස් වරගින ටීචර්ස් උන්න මි ඉන්ටග්‍රේට් උරුමුග බෑ මි ඩොමේන්ස් තක බහාලුමුග බෑ අසු කොඩක උදගු වෙගෙන් එබෝල එහෙම මියන් හමලුම මිහාරිස් බොඩ ෆෝකස් කොග්ගන් හම කුරියා ට්‍රේනිස් තක් දේවි ෆමිහාරවන දැන් මී අසු මෑගන් ගොත ගලුමෙන්ගේ තීමේ මේ ලෙසන් ප්ලෑන් එක ෆෝමැට් එමින්දි හම එම ෆ්‍රතමනු alumen mitanuga minnani ham outcome me jahafa outcome lafa outcome ge alumen jehene learning intention ka success criteria ikala alumen content and skills ta bahalinta e bala alumen jehene mitangaliya den eduga filavalu ane eduga mi ane alumen mihar megan gotega mitanu galume mihar mi liani ane amiga ikala negunu gabiliyat ave salume mita mi liani misalakan alume negi islam diniya ruhaniyat ge ba ehme mege teren ko bato alume e filawala emme gulun hori indicator ke indicator alume mita mi liani ame gota sami values ge bagave se ya emme gulun hori values enaga amil mihar misalaka mi amila nafsa gulun huri agetto e aguge dashun ko bato ege ane alumen balance balane kamaki ege tere kandala furikantan komme sekkam alumen sila ane select hurani hemi e alumen mita miliyani den miga fahan alumen mi annani asuga mi ma hami ane sharing time den mi fasheni class fasheni mi lesson plan mi fasheni mi ar e batan aske hemi ma e lesson plan ga puratama mi anna sharing time ga alumen hama boda kudinna eki wahaka dekuma mi hial badal kuruma dem muhimmu kamen ekama banama kudinna ekon wagut kolen heda kollum ten efa walme mi me harakata kamidani dem transition nen alme mi ga jahafa minnani yasuga mi e teacher kan amilla engani enak endani kinetto enakon transition ne beenum beto kudinge manage kuruma fase hekan asu transition ne mi en harakatun anin harakate daer minnani then mitanga magan ma harakaten hama whole group of bes kende vidane nuni sub group takaka bes kende vidane magan gotega ma harakan asu ginafara gende veni hama ekko ehma gendaeruga mi rala fi ma harakatun asuga mi annani ehen sub areas dane mi learning centers taka nunia mi klahoga refuri areas taka mi annani maseke egeterega anneruga mi annani hama eki areas ta misalaka midu mi innani science islam islam harmindi alume mihem miga jahafinaka sassuga miga alumen liyefe innan jeheni e learning center egenan den alumen bracket එක අස්සුගේ මාදා ගෙනන් අලුමන ජහල දන මෙහර ඒරන් අලුමන ෆසේහවන එකල outcome hasil waakan ingen අස්සුග මිහෙම් ජහලීම den hama komme doga sama outro 30 minute vinnane 30 minute ka outro ga salumen hama mi relate mi kurani hama subject related ecche dane ehma mi asuga den nimmum gotun alumen hama mi fembar wazan kurun nga ba hama kuriya gendan chena hama feshuni suren gos nimen den ehmi ma huriya harakate kuriya dar mi ane mi har edu misalaka checklist e benu kurani hem beja checklist kun alumen miga kandeli finnan jena kinekkan alumen observe kurani nuniya kinekkan alumen check kurani kujjege ss kurmal den hama eduga reflection nume alumen warabboda hama belene kujja ss kurevene ehmi mi magadu gotakan alumenge integration alumen gendam benum wagon adi gendagwe den mi annani asu alumen hama mi ekiga hama miharu ane hama teachers ge view be sama komesaraka balale den ebba teachers eba bune hama waragina teachers bune wara rangale mi handle kuram wara fase hay kudin den aneka kudinna mi individual kudinna warabboda keta kureve den ei ekala mi be huriha kudin efara kanu eki group tahuga waki mi masake kurane hem komme group ega mi innani kan hatare nuna pastudi ya
mi ane mi 2 minute nuata 10 minute terega kurukolla devun ede
ya mini presentation okay den mi annani ane den ebba teacher ebba bune kudin ma bodan engage wa kama faha kurave masekatan ma bodan ya shaug beri kama ekiga masake kuruma ma boda kudin gaya veka kudi group tako kudi masake kurairu gasuga bodu group aka boran kudina fasehe masake kuram besega then ma in-depth knowledge nunia ma tafsil kon maulu aka behe gotum maulumat kudina libeye adi ege me kudina ekala eagen kuriyad dane furusat boda libeye me gota gendiyam mi magan gote galbe mi har gendaga ami hama early years ge hama duniyage gina best practices ge hama me beenum kurani integrated teaching ne mi huriha kudin mi foundation stage ge mi kudin gendu mataka subject onne nugendane den tibefna faha korevene asia vidal wehen asia ge mi presentation ge boda domain wise kom innani gengosa ei asolmenge magan bayak yasu domain wise kon alume mi ss kurani ehem begen ekkala content and skills tan alume negi achieve domains takan alumen mi bahalani bahali alumen ekala subject kotaka nune kudi mi ss kureveni ki Nisalakan alumen S subject area ge gotan alumen negi echen alumen nan eti mi SS kure vidane ehen subject area ge echaka gulwagen mis ehema komme echakan komme maaddaage outcome akan alumen nujehene kommen activity yan hadafa eti kujja inge to balakan e ule harakatuge terena kujja kura masekatuge teren alumen nan eti velene den mi ane meagan gote galwanama mi huriha before nawe sama mi miharo rajyega practice kura goy mi den huriha befna singila ban kan adi alumen ama waran aakola adwe salumen time eba beenum ve miya bodan wannan ehmi alumen ama bodan mi rawani adis miya teachers na tankol faseha goteka mige tere badigen gendeve gotekan alu kan ane gendani den tingadiru alumenge mi innani den tingadiruge time alumen su waraboda manage kuran eba je mi 3 hours hasu beenu kuran eba je alumenge kiyawa dinunga asu halgi gatuga alumenna mi rangala gendan asu 3 hours es madekam alumenge miharu reifa ane system way gotun adi classroom ge jagataka balaru alumenne kam mewuren ituru kureve kashem mihara kwenne em baraboda shukriya hore habbe funna den sualen ekama wanam hama kol rimalwana ma inge me bar kun jawab aro eto balana shukriya baraboda
shukriya shiyama vara me informative presentation shiyama ves devvi ehem wima mi wagutu hama mi hulwale famiyati huri habe flunge ves suala hama chat box ka private ko ves message private ko sual fono vene nuata hama huriha befrone fenna gotavve sama chat box ka sual fono ve maduwen men e sual taka me penistum medori pal jawab berwe to balana em huriha befrone chat box ka mi sual ta type kolla devun eden den aluwen menna enge mi waragina school takuga mi ane group ege gotuga mi teacher on eba bari wadannawa kan ehem wima mi egotave school takum mes priswale kama wanama control ebe flaku hama wakiwaki swal talli ubima ve aluwen menna swal talli ben mi wagutu aluwen atugave sebuhuri komisarka swalu ane tibe flon registration gave raba for sual taken hurma eko mi wagutu by sual aluwan mi panelist na kurmat kollana egotun Dr. Asia there is a question for you by a participant the question says that some teachers find it difficult to understand how mathematics can be integrated in the foundation stage mathematical ideas sometimes I am not sure if it is like calculations or not but mathematics how to integrate mathematics can you please briefly explain
okay so math and science tend to both be subjects that a lot of early years teachers struggle with incorporating well So one of the things that I remind teachers to do is step back from this traditional idea that they have that children have to be doing addition and subtraction and on pieces of paper or rote memorization of numbers. So one of the ways that you can incorporate mathematical concepts into your classroom is by embracing them as everyday components. So helping children to understand that math is everywhere and it's a part of everything that they do. So for example, if you're in the early foundation stage classes and you're still teaching children basic mathematical concepts around counting, having children as you're taking attendance, counting how many people are here, or in small group activities, how many children are here, how many of these types of materials do we need? Let's make sure that they're organized properly. And remember, math isn't just about the concepts of rote counting. So there's measurements in there. So concepts such as weight and distance and time are all things that can be incorporated into your lessons as well. How many steps does it take to get here? How tall have you grown? Let's put up a growth chart in our classroom so that we can measure how tall you are. So you want to do things like that, and remember, within mathematics are also concepts of geometry. And so this is the integration of shapes. One of the things that I think teachers shy away from doing is giving children the specific mathematical terminology. So helping children understand the difference between a circle and a sphere by using the correct language. So again, it may be as not as a direct teaching activity, but as part of a conversation that you're having with children. So we have all of these different colored spheres here. What can we do with them? So, so it's a concept of using the language. It's also the concept of incorporating it into everyday activities, and not just saying, okay, it's math time. We need to sit down and we need to do counting activities, or we need to learn this particular concept. It's really about integrating those types of things into your regular daily experiences, whether it's during a morning circle time or a lunch activity or a casual conversation that you have with children. I would also really encourage teachers to use language and literacy materials to extend concepts in particular areas, especially around math and science. So there are lots of children's books that focus on mathematical and scientific concepts that are developmentally appropriate for the age, but incorporate characters and ideas that are just not specific to teaching a particular math skill. So I would say look for ways to incorporate those types of things into your classroom experiences and discussions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Asia. Shiyama yavves eban komme sarka gulun huri suale hama mi anikave sama waki madda taka behe gotun eburi guruan madda kine toye mi integrate koken kiyawa deni
මිහාරු අනේ අලුණ හැම දන්නවලම් බේනුමනි ගුරුවන් මාද්දා ගලුමංගේ බොඩ මිදනි අකුරුතකා මේ කුදි ලෆ්සත කලිමත කියමුගේ බෑ මිදනි එහෙවිම අසුග බයිෆාරන් අලුමෙන්නක අම ගින ෆාරක ගුරුවන් බෑග අලුමෙන්නකන් ඉන්ටග්‍රේට් එන් කුරෙවෙන එකම කලුමෙන්න හැම මි ගුළුම් හුරි එතක සලුමෙන්න කොමසරකන් curriculum ge hunna bෑතකුගේ තෙරෙන් අලුමෙන්න බය නගාගෙන ඒක ගෙන්දෙ වෙන්නේ දැන් අලුමෙන්ගේ ට්‍රේනින් ගසසු වරබොඩන් අලුමෙන් කුදින්න කියාදී ෆවානි මිහාර ගුරුවන්ගේ බෑ අසුගේ බයි ෆහරකන් උදාන හැම ඒගොතම් මිසාලකන් අනේ ඉංග්‍රීසි දායිරු ගබස් මි අලුමෙන්න මිසාලකන් letter identification න දායිරු අලුමෙන්න නුකුලිතානේ එහෙ නමවස් ඒගේ තෙරේග හුන්නානේ ඉංග්‍රීසික නෝනි දිවෙහිගේ සුන්නානේ ගුළුන් හුන්න බෑත මිසාලක බස් බේනුම් කුරුමුගේ බය මුආමලත් කුරුමුගේ බය විබෑතකන් අස්ස කොම්මෙ තීමක බස් අලුමෙන්න හැම කුදින්න ගුල්වාගෙන් ගෙන්දෙ වෙන්නේ ඒ මමි ගුරුවන්ගේ බෑ අස්තුගේ බොඩන් අලුමෙන්න හැම ගින ෆහර හැම මේ හැම නුකුළු වෙනේ අලුන් දන්නවනේ හැම ඒ හැම අලුමෙන් ජෙහෙනි වකින් නගාගෙන් හැම කොම්මස් දේ තෙරේ කල්ලාගේ ගෙන් කුරිය ගෙන්දාෂ
शुक्रिया श्यामा मी वेस हम अफदेवर का रिपीट वे फाइन सवाले मी वगुतो चेट कवे सेबैंग आदि अड़वन में न कुरियन लिपुन सवाल का हो गवे सेबैंग मी komme subject ka curriculum framework ka ebainde ane recommended number of periods ebainde detto komme madda ekabes ehen innairu mi e kihinetoye gendani mi wakiwaraka periods lafa e period taka danitoye integrate kurairu ekan yagin kurani kihinetoye
මිහාර අලුමෙන් content and මිහාර outcomes තන් අලුමෙන් මි නගනි එකන් යගින් කුරුමට්ටක ඒ outcome හාසිල් කුරුමන් අලුමෙන් මි මසක්කම් මි රාවණි එහෙම බිම komme duhege tereme samahuriha mi subject area the link wege hinge adani adi by subject areas madun hinge adani enama wes almenge muli duwahoga sharing time auto play ami huriha gadige tereng almen nge kende bitane wahake ki grade one feshigens bell system minna gota 30 first minute kunne almenge bell system ga bell jahagane nune gendani ki enama wes integrate kogen gende venya e subject එක මම focus ඉනස් අනේ subject එකේ තරම් integrate වෙගෙන නැතානි එහෙම ඒගොතන් අලුමෙ මසක රාවන් ජෙහෙන ඒගොත රේවුනි මලුමෙන හැම ඒක cover කුරන් ජෙහෙ number of minutes අලුමෙන cover කුරවෙන්
शुक्रिया श्यामा अरुणु मेदुकुरं हमा ए सवाल कुरे विदेफलोना साफ वेजकमा the next question is for Dr. Asia. I don't know how relevant this is or how how related this is to early childhood, but I will just read out the question. Can you please highlight on forming questions for an activity?
Okay, I'm going to make an assumption on what they mean here, and if I'm not correct, the participant can ask again. But so learning in the early years and learning across the academic spectrum should really be a study in curiosity. So really helping children to remain curious about their world and their environment and the things that they're interested in. So when you're talking about forming questions around activities, I think you should step back from that first and relate it back to what we talked about a little bit earlier of making sure that children are well connected to the subject matter that you're trying to teach. So do they have an interest in it? Does it relate to things that they see in their environment? Does it relate to concepts that will directly improve their development? So this should be the basis of what you're teaching, and then your questions should stem from there. So good questions for young children are developmentally appropriate to their age. So are they presented in ways that are easy to understand for them? Are you ensuring that children have a good idea and central concept around what it is that you're asking them? Are you giving them enough time and context to respond to the questions that you ask? Oftentimes I will observe teachers in the classrooms and they will ask questions without a whole lot of regard for allowing children time to process and think about those things. Good questions also are open-ended. So making sure that you allow space for children's responses. So there's open-ended questions and there are closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are questions that can be answered with a yes or no. So we want to avoid using questions like that because it limits the amount of linguistic engagement for children. So for example, if you said, "Did you like that activity?" Yes or no. If you reframed that question to say, "What did you like about that activity?" It helps children to have to stop and think about, well, what was it about that activity that I liked? Or phrasing questions in a way that you allow children to give their own expertise and thoughts. Tell me what you think about whatever the topic is, or can you explain this to me? So again, setting the stage for curiosity and engagement is a great frame for creating questions that are relevant within the classroom.
Thank you. Shyama, do you have something to add to that question? Det vill säga ett kolumben. me and mic mute kati hunne.
Okay, can you repeat the question? I have some issues in the battery issues.
Oh, all right. So let us move on with another question then.
Okay.
All right. So Dr. Asia, we have some questions related to classroom management, also about differentiating learning, and also about including children with special educational needs. I think these are all the same thing in different phrasings. So can you please highlight on how to deal while you are delivering an integrated curriculum?
Okay. Okay. So to begin with, when we talked about making sure that that all of your activities are developmentally appropriate. When we say developmentally appropriate, it should be from the perspective of what is developmentally appropriate for the children in your classroom. So not only typically developing children that are on the developmental spectrum, but also atypically developing children who may need additional support. So as a teacher, you need to be really clear about what developmental level your children are at and what abilities they have. And the best way to do that is to do continual observations and assessments on your children so that you have an ongoing record of their abilities. Then you take those concepts and build out your activities based on that. So integrated learning and using learning centers and themes allows you to provide activities at differing levels. So as a teacher, any activity that you create, you need to create it based on how can this particular activity be modified to meet the needs of all of the children in the classroom. Okay, so there's a concept that we talk about that is called many right ways. There's in early childhood, there's many right ways to do things. And so within those many right ways, we have to meet children where they're at within a given activity. So that means that the easiest way that I've found that teachers are able to adapt to this idea is to think about it from the concept of creating an activity for the middle. So the children who are typically developing and who are in the middle, and then you use that as the base activity, and from there you add on or you subtract to make sure you're meeting the needs of the other children in the classroom and their developmental levels. So you're not giving children a different activity, you're modifying the activity that's there. So a lot of the times what I see when teachers say that they're differentiating learning, what they're actually doing is providing different activities for children. That's not what differentiation is. Differentiation is a modification of an activity to meet the needs of where children are at. So for example, let's say you have an activity in an upper KG classroom that is writing or reading based. Let's take writing based. So you're introducing children to writing concepts. If your core objective is not the actual physical act of writing, and it's about children expressing their understanding about something, then you can then take that activity and say, okay, for the children who are able to write, they're going to write about their experiences. For the children who don't have that skill set, we're going to have conversations about this. So I'm going to have a one-on-one engagement where I can scribe or take notes for the child and then read that back to them as part of the learning experience. I'm still gathering information about what children know and how well they know it, but I'm not requiring them to be frustrated with the skill that they don't have, which is writing something down physically. Doesn't mean that you're not giving those children opportunities to learn how to write or improve their skills, but it may not be in this particular activity. And then for those students who write well and who need to be challenged, then you can add things to that activity. Maybe you extend the amount of writing that they do. Maybe you partner them with someone who doesn't quite have that skill, and they work with that person to make it a more challenging experience for them. But a good rule of thumb is have a baseline activity, and from that baseline activity, either build up or build down based on what children need. But always keep in mind when you're doing that is thinking back to what is my original objective? What do I want children to actually get out of this activity? And then base it from there.
Thank you. Shiyama echet kollang benefulto me vakya gulige. Differentiation classroom management then me adi sen coding integrate kogen kiyawa dena gotta.
Me already sama comments echen hama dannawala me har me asha demme vidalu hen asuga alumena me differentiated learning nebuni ma asuga gine hama halmene sama me har rajyage classroom terembe sama me fennani hama tapatu harakattake hama asha vidalu hen e deve harakata kudako boduko nuni e objective hasilwa gotan alumen me ravam me jeheni. Then classroom management ang asuga miga emme integrated teaching ka daruga emme faseha kamaki mi waki group taka huriha group taka almenna masekate khandeli fawani e masekatuge me ge tere ya kudi group taka bahala gendiyama teachers unnabes ane de adi class de teacher un tiberuga de teacher unna mi areas ta commissar ka monitor kuram bahala weekend teacher roll out kura gota hunna kamawanya aswara fasya kudinna amilla masakka kutuge responsibility hawal kogga masakka kurwa anya classroom ga kudin engage wegen tibene kam kudinna wagoti ki asu gina faralmena wagoti ki asu mareve fawa masakka asuga kudinga level over ma matiwani nuni kudinna ma fasewani vima wagoti ki kudin me fasiha masakka ka vima me wagoti ki waranga nimmalane den kudin kurane ehe masakka tenuni roll out kuran emihuna rangalan ane rawagen kuriyan nugendeve kamawanya alumena manage kuran udaguwane class e kudin sakara jahana nuni kudin deviate wane nuni komme sen kamaka dane kurane hen kame neti ai me engage kurmanta ka abadda salume masakka warabada visna ba challenging masakka takin asu kudinna teni kudinna kureve wara den mige mane ki asu alumen e mezega kari ishindegen tibegen kudin fotoge kura masakka tan ekani focus koggen eka nune teachers tibeni kudinna foto koran deve masekate ves adi ane e pelen jehani kudin amille kureve gota kudinna du kollashe jen teacher jehani facilitate gota classroom ga ane mudi classroom observe ko monitor ko kuriya kudinna daane goitge irusha dete e mi gotan alumena so kanta nukureti manage koran unda gudi ekamuk mihar kudi group taka bahala ma gina teachers amma miharu hama bunarga bunani hama wara fasehe manage koran class mi kudi group taka bahalan kudina masaken hawa korone den e masakatege salumen kandalan jehen ekkala differentiated learning na mehar e ma kura kame nimije kama wanya den kurane kame bes e kare funanne komme tanakan emme harakate nune rafa bahattani ki e guligen anna harakatake funane den hamalu mi fursadagam bunalam benu asu alumennan harakata kammiwani ginafara classroom teruga fotuga dekala masekate tini mekam ega asu fotuga de masekate nu muhimmi kiye miga muhimmi kujjaya ete understand wegen concept kujjaya ane nagagane mene kala harakata karewu ega boda minani kujja construct hoga daskurmuga bam genna mijeni ehema e komme nuje fota karda ha benu kurakashe mi asalumenge magando e beenuma kiwes foundation stage ga text fengalumen tayar nukurumge kandu we have is madukofa practically kujja involve koggan kujja kora kahala masekken asu boda dirun mega beenumani
shukriya shiyama mi den suala ki mi den අනහෙන් වාහකයාගේ තෙරේග ප්‍රෙසෙන්ටේෂන් තෙරේග අඩුවන්න ෆාහග කුරෙවුණ එකම කොයි සුවාලෙන් ඔතීම අඩුවන්න මේ සුවාල් ශියාමයක් කොල්ලාන play based learning කිහා වර්ගයේ focus එක දෙවිෆ ඔවේතෝයේ national curriculum මේ අධ්‍යාසක දැන් අඩුවන්න හීවනි සුවාල් කුරෙවි බොඩ මේ අඩුවන්න මෙන් integrated curriculum එක වාහක දක්වා තීවේ play based මේ ඒ වාහකත නොදක වේති කන්නේ ගෙහෙම වීම මේ ඒ විශ්නුමක ජවාබ දෙවුනේ
දෙවරරංගල් සුවාලකන්නේ සොල්මෙන් සිලබස් තකෙන් හදාප හුන්නාති ඒකන්නේ ගස බොඩ මේ කුරෙවේ සුවාලකි ඒ සිලබස්ගේ පුරි අවුට්කම්ස් තක කණ්ඩෙලිප කුදින ගෙන්දන් දෙන් අසු ගිරපාර ටීචරුන්ගේ මේ විශ්නු මිහුන්නනි අනේ කරිකියුලම් එක මෙහෙන් සිලබස් තක ලියප හොරජේ අයග ලියප බුණා නුනි අය බුනේ ෆුනා අවුට්කම් එක හාසිල් කුර්මට තක කුති නෙබජේ බෑවරු කරදා හගනුනි ෆොතුගේ මසෙක්කත් තකෙන් හවාල් කුරා නුනියා මික ඒකම ඒ කුරියා කම සල්බන මි ටීම් බේස් ටීචින් නු ඉන්ටග්‍රේට් කොග මි ගෙන්දාරු ගල්මෙන්ගේ මෑගඩු මි concept එක ගොත මිනනි play based learning ඉගෙතෝ ඒ play based learning නිනකම වඤ්ඤා play වේ ගොතකන් අලුමෙන් කුදින්න මි ගෙන්දන් ජේනි කුදින් අසුක classroom ගල්මෙන් ගෙන්ගොලෙන් ජේනි කුජ්ජා ඒ ෆිලාවල මි ලිය හදාගෙන දස්කුරා දස්වර එක මෙමු කුළුමුගේ තෙරන්නේ එමුගේ දස්කුරණි එමිහුන ටෙස්ට් එක ගොත මීති මිහෙන් ඉංගෙන් ජේනේ ඒගොතුග ඒ විශ්නුමක නූනේ අලුමෙන් ගෙන්දානි කීකම අලුමෙන්ගේ ටීචරුන්ගේ හඬලා ෆින්නානි මේ ඔට්කම් හාසිල් කුරුමට ටකා කුදින මේ හරකැත්තක අලුමෙන් මිරාවනි මීනෙන් එම පස්සේ හැ මේ හරකැත්ත මිගොත රේවීමේ දස්වානි එහෙම කුළුමුග කොම්මස් කහලා කුලිවරගේ තෙරෙන් අලුමෙන් ගෙන්දා කාල ගොතක අස්සු මිරාවනි දැන් ගිරෆාරන් අස්සුග ටීචරුන්න කුදින්න ලියවේකම වෙස් කබූල් කුරණි ගඬුග ෆොතුග අකුරු අලාගෙන ලියුනීම එකම ඒක බදල්ග කුජ්ජාය මිහාරු මිසාලකන් එන මේ වෙලීග වෙස් එන මේ අකුරෙන් හනිකති කො මිලියෆාන එන මේ ක්ලේම් වෙස් එන අකුරු හදාෆාන එකම එන සිකුන්ඩියෙන් ඒ අකුරෙන් ඉන්න බට්ටම නෙගිකින් එනගී දෙනි ඒ මානකි එනෙන් ඒ අකුරු දස්වේ නුනි අකුරු කියන් එබෙන්ගේ එන කොම්මස් ගොතකින් හරකාතිග තෙරෙන් එන අමිල්ලෙන් කුරා කමකු මේක මානකියෙන් අස්සුග ෆොතුග ලියුමෙන් නුනි එහෙම මේ හුස් ප්ලේ මෙතඩ්ස් තකකේ මිදානි එම් එගොතන් අස්සොල්මෙන්ගේ රේවුම් ආනේ ටීචරු රාවායරක මි රාවන් ජේනි දෙකම අනේ හැම එක දලන හැම ෆාහ කොල්ලම් බේනු මී අස්ලුග ක්ලාහුග මිහාර සල්මන ෆෙන්නානි හැම එ පැටර්න් එක හැම හුරියා ක්ලාක දියස් මිසාලකන් එන් ඔබ්ජෙක්ටිව් එක හාසිල් කුරුමට ක හැම හුරියා ක්ලාගෙන් හරකාතෙ මිකෙන්දන් ඒ කොම්මෙ වාක නුජේ මිහාර ක්ලාහුග කුදින්ගේ නිස්පතුන් කුදින්ගේ ලෙවල් වෙස් තෆාත්වානේ කුදින්ගේ විස්තුන් තෆාත්වානේ කුදින්න උගනේ ෆුරි මිම්බරස් තෆාත් වෙතාන එහෙම ජකම වඤ්ඤා කොම්මෙ හුරියා ටීචර් එන් හරකාතෙ ගෙන්දා කනුජේ එකම හාසිල් කුරුමක एक क्लास के टीचर का इंगेने क्लास के कुदिंग एम्मे शौगवेरी कमाय की कोंगोतक कतो दानी එහෙම ජේ ඒකතක අලුමෙන් අසුරාවන් ජේ ඒ අස එවිස්තුන් අලුමෙන් ගෙන්ගුලෙන් ජේ නේගත ඒගොතක ගොස අලුමෙන් හැම බොඩන් හැම මී කුජ්ජා එකල शौगवेरी වාණි මී කුලේ කහලා නුනි කුළුමුගේ තෙරෙන් කොම්මස් කම දස්වා කහලා ගොතක ගෙන්දියය ඒගොතක හැම රාවගෙන් ගෙන්දුන් වරම් මුහිම් දැන් ඒක මේ හැම අලුමෙන් ගවමේ මන්හජු තන් දෙenge તો play based learning නංගේ මීග අලුමෙන් ෆණ්ඩාලා ෆමීරි වකි මින්ගන් තක මියනි කන්තෙන් තකෙන් හාසිල් වාංග බජේ කුදින් නං එකම එකන්තන් හාසිල් කුරුමටක ටීචරුන්ග කමකේ ඒ play based learning න කුදින් ගෙන්ගොස්කෙන් එච්චි කුදින් උගන්න ඇතිනු
අද මේ thank you අරබඩ ශියාමා දැන් අලුවන දෙහවි අනේ ශියාමා විදාලි වාහකෙන් මේ අනේ අලුවන් මෙන්ගේ අස්ලෝ කරිකියුලම් ගා අවුට්කම් බේස්ඩ් කරිකියුලම් මෙන් ඔයකම බීඑස් අනේ මේ කියවාදින මුග බේනුම් පුරානේ පෙඩගොජි යකි ප්ලේ බේස්ඩ් ලර්නින් එහෙනම් තෝ ආදේ then සුවාලකි I think Dr. Asia and also Shyama can try to address this question. It is about daily planning, which is better to have a daily plan or a weekly plan?
So I'll let Shyama answer the specifics of, you know, how your curriculum expectations, but in general, the answer is that your planning should be ongoing. You should You should have a weekly plan that includes daily activities and exercises, but you should also be modifying your planning in the moment. So if things are not going well, if something you planned within your weekly plan, and you've reached the middle of the week and you're realizing that children are not truly understanding the concepts, or they've understood the concepts well and you need to move forward. So you need to be editing those plans regularly. The only way you can do that well is by doing continual observations in the classroom and assessing children's learning. So I think hopefully you've heard this concept multiple times throughout the session today, is that observation is really important, assessment is really important, and those things feed into so much of what you do in the classroom as a teacher. To answer the question about planning, you should always be planning as a teacher. You should have formalized planning that gives you a week-based plan with individual daily activities. But during those daily activities, you should be assessing continually and making modifications to that planning. And I know as a classroom teacher, that sounds like that is a concept that you will not be able to do when you have a classroom full of children and they're all needing your attention at the same time. It is definitely a skill, and that skill only gets better with practice. So you will learn ways to assess in the moment quickly, learning your own shorthand, keeping notes handy so that you can keep track of things, creating assessment checklists. These are all different strategies that you can use, and assessment in and of itself can be a whole session. But that planning needs to be ongoing. And you should never write a weekly plan that's set in stone that you don't go back and revisit to see if modifications need to be made.
Thank you. Also, I just saw another question related to that one, but this one is about. This one is asking about the difference between subject-based planning and daily plans. I really don't understand what that means, but then I think I'm assuming that it means like, should you have specific subject-related plans or a daily plan that is integrated for all the subjects? Shyama? Shyama, you're on mute.
It should be an integrated plan. Me aslo an integrated plan nakum me annani asude daily plans me mihara aharmenge teachers me kuranje he kamaki asluga me e team misalaka hinga dane de hafta da team de hafta da team wes e team feshumga kuriga jehene reifa hunnan de hafta ya warag daily plans take e komme duhaka dene plans take ega mane ki eki fix le for lecture nune mihar misalaka miedo harmen ane miedan lesson negi nagairuga ega fenitana madamaga rawa fin lesson gennan jehe badal take misalaka huredana hama classroom ga kudinga knowledge huttu mimbara kanuni kudinna interest in ane mi kamaka behe gotun ham ega liefa non nechen astan ehmejje almen denganna duge lesson eba edukollan jehene ehme change kurevejene kam tayyar we fam har teacherun astuga mi tayyar koffami baatan jani duha tayyar kuram vi masuga warabbodu ane bureka we by far teacher absent vejja denganna teacher klaha wannam vi maves asuga furusatu nulibe tayyar waakashe ehema mi kuribaga ready we fa tibima alumenan huriha ecche ready ko kudinna mi for koddem pase hawan ehema warammu mo kamen ei reifina unit kan ekkon tayyar we fa tibun kama lessons ta ege maneki hama mi edu kullawanna eruga e lesson ngalmen ben mi hama lesson ge teremes badal kurumuge me creativity teachers ge hunnan jehene ei hama maganu anne benuma king hama daily plans taken hedu mi subject plans taken no me hedeniki hama en area anin area integrate kogge main activity yakun areas taka dagotan heden jehene
වර්බඩ ශුක්‍රියා මේ අලුන් මෙන්ගේ වගුතුවෙස් මිහාරු මිවැනි හමවෙෆා එකමකොස් මේ නේ වර මුහිම සුවාලෙන් ඔති මාළුන් හිතන් එරි ශියාමා යමි සුවල් කොල්ලාන මේ හබඩ අලුන් මෙන්ගේ මේ ටොපිකා බුළුමෙන්නෙන් එකමකොස් වර ගින බේෆුළු මිසුවල් කුරවවා ෆේ බැන් එහෙම මාළුන් මිසුවල් කොල්ලාන මේ අනේ ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් ස්ටේජ් ගේ මේ අනේ Mionani de grade detto mi LKG a UKG onna iru de mi de aharuge syllabus ta wakive fanonnani kivegen toye den ane mi den esuala ekuhama ane mi waragina beflon asawa feben text for the students for the nunca negarone hiwani ane teachers guide mi hunnane toye libe gota hasa ko miharu ala mi revise koge mi nerunu mi syllabus takuge
warboda shukriya mi alumen LKG UKG asubaha ge minugendani bodan alumen domain based assess mi kurani kurairuga milestones ta mi the age group ga waran similar milestones ta ke mi hunnani wara kudu difference mi hunnani ehemi alumen eti bane miharu misalakan huredane mi UKG an annairuga LKG kujjegge ane LKG an annairu UKG kujjegge milestones komisaraka ane furiham kore miharu asuga wagotiki miharu gina faharan asuki ega ala kudinge wara boda mi domain innani ane hasil vefa ehe malumen miti mi egotan alumen kannanalani miharu social emotional ane physical mi language kahalechi mi alumen boda mi socially mi gengule batakan asal men ane kanda neli kamugo ve salmege innane standard document curriculum ma tayyar ko fenne ege inna nalumen kandala mi hame kan nalumen waki ko mi hunnani mi reading ge chita mi har misalakan alphabet ane word sentences mi batakan ekane nalumen boda focus ko hunnani waki ko hama hisabuge segotan adadu tawke ba ඒති ඉන්නනේ අලුමෙන් කණ්ඩාලා ෆමිහාර ග්‍රේඩ් එක එහෙම කොම්ම බෙෆ්ලකස් මෙ හුරි හදු ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ડોකියුමන්ට් වස්සක කරමුන් යාමති බෙෆුනා ඉංගිලව්වනේ කොබා කන් අනේ LKG ጋ ඉංගෙජ්ජේ මෙම්බර් කොබා කන් UKG ගේ ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ડોකියුමන්ට් එක ඉවාලා ඉච්චෙනු ඒ ග්‍රේඩ් ලෙවල් නිමේරුක කුදින්න ඉංගෙජ්ජේ මෙම්බර් එහෙම ඒක උන් කණ්ඩාලා ෆුන්නානේ එබෑතකන් එහෙම තිබෙෆුනා වර ෆසෙහන් ඒ ડોකියුමන්ට් උන් ෆෙන්නානේ ඒ කණ්ඩාලි ෆොරවර් එකම කරිකුලම් වල බෑක් ඔෆ් කන් උන්නානේ the mihara ma amukon kewade be from veje ai document pelima ingilabane kobato gendambi memberaki LKG UKG ga ei alumen hamekani reading writing ge bayan ekan launch eheti alumen curriculum include kuri ekam standard document mihara alumen atu gotima ebe alumen mihimanali den kure vi konsualetto
den hama wara kuruko vedade de valun menge gadives jefotima ane mi foi takabe hegoto mihar alumen teachers guide mihar tayyar kuraifawa me tayyar kurumga puram fashage mulane ade alumen wenime e namaves tibe furna mi ane ingilava ane kuri alumen gengulunu mi ane syllabus fotogaves adi teachers guide ges komisarakan hunnani gendambi mistraba echi den ane alumen ge training terega waraboda hunnane mi gendambi gotuge batan hama huriha school taka share kuraifa bis mihar mi baguta benumwa member ekam kalumen hama miharu mi file teachers ga tayyar kunu wansakat kamitani hama tayyar kuru no abaka uriya school taka kalumen hama isakura barabara shukriya me alwan menge wagutu hama itura first minute wes negijje hemima miha hisabun alwan men mi webinar kuru kollanan adiwe sama waregina beflunge suwatan eburi ane mi alwan men den mi kuriyan wettaga ehem webinar ta bes bevoma plan kure fa oti tive hama ami huriha befluna ves anika ves sam kuriyan webinar ta ka dawat arwan hama tibeflunge tiswata mi kure vima den alwan men jawab erwe gota kon jawab dena alwan warabada maafan eden huriha beflunge huriha swala address ko devene wara wagutu alwan men gene tima Aiko hama panelist unnawe Shyama and Dr. Asia. I know it's a very late hour for you. It must be close to midnight for you.
It's after midnight, but that's okay.
It's after midnight. Oh. We thank you very much on behalf of all our teachers and I for you for taking this time with us, and also for sharing a very, very relevant and like inspiring information with our teachers. I'm sure they are going to be very, very helpful for our teachers. Thank you everyone. Horiya befrana swara bara boda shukur dannawan alun menna eko mi wagutu dolugadi ren hairu heda kol devvi thive mi alun menna mi wagutu mi screen audience ke gotuga mi gagan ka sateka war ka beflu mi wagutu noadiha ha beflun tibbevi kamuga vies alun menge audience ki wara boda audience school takuga ama mi komme school එක වකි වකි audience ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತುಗ ಅಳುನ್ ಮೆಗೆ audience o theme hama mi warabode audience ekam faag kollam warabode shukriya huriya befronabes weekend ge mi wagut kolu alun men naiko heda kol deviti ummid kuran hama mi session ki ti befrona war faada huri session ka bikam wassalamu alaikum.